Florida, cello. We got Jane at DU, Jane Maurer, instructional technologist, University of Denver. Widget Whiteberry, produce virtual speaking in Second Life, 45 public affairs program each week. And we got Bruce Gross, instructor for GPI WordPack. Andy Evans, Social Research Foundation, First Opinion Panel in Second Life, New York City. And just joined us. We're doing introductions here. I think I missed a few. I can't seem to get my chat window open here. So feel free to type away who you are in text chat. And while you do that, I want to introduce our speaker today, Karen Cooper. Dr. Karen Cooper, research scientist for Naval Air Systems Command, who's going to present results from an empirical research study investigating the relationship between engagement, achievement, and performance in Second Life. So I know we've had a pretty big emphasis on military people here. We had someone who, Alicia Sanchez, who also came from Orlando last week, but that is where a lot of the action is happening right now in virtual learning. So I really appreciate Karen Cooper coming here to share, and for those of you that are new to our meetings, feel free to type away your questions, comments as we go along here. I'll try to follow the text chat and relay questions and comments to Karen here. Feel free to use speech as well. Just hit the speak button here if you want to speak up with a question during the hour here. So Karen, thanks so much for joining us, and I'll give the floor or the boardwalk over to you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Good. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, before I begin, I want to thank Anders and Light for asking me to speak with you all this afternoon or this noontime, because it's noontime where I am right now. I'm not sure where y'all are coming in from, although I did see the intros. This piece of research that I will be highlighting is part of my dissertation work that was done several years ago, and I partnered very closely with the Air Force in evaluating one of their learning activities. And what I specifically looked at was the relationship between a learner's level of engagement and their ability to perform. So let me start by explaining my research focus. I'll come on over here and I'll get myself turned around just a little bit. If you'll just bear with me for 1 second. So this was as I mentioned before, this was a piece of empirical research that I did a few years ago. And this is the three legs of my research focus. So it was the intersection of these, as I went out into the literature and I examined what had been conducted and researched in virtual environments specific to learning. It was the intersection of these three legs of the three-legged stool that I discovered that empirical research was scant, and it drew my interest. The first, of course, is the technology-enabled learning, and I chose the virtual world of Second Life. The second leg of the stool is engagement, and that was my theoretical framework. So that's what I used to determine the effects of learning. And then the third piece of the three-legged stool was my actual learning activity, and I'll explain each one of these three legs in more detail. But so those were the three legs. It was the intersection of actually learning, evaluating engagement, and moving it into a virtual environment. The first leg is the virtual world. So the virtual world that I chose was Second Life, and he was the most prominent option back in the 2008 time frame, and provided a great opportunity for interactivity and for an autonomous, independent learning experience. The Air Force had just built an island, and it seemed to be very, very promising in the direction of creating sort of a inquisitive learning. three-legged stool was engagement, as I mentioned before. That I mentioned before, and that is I used the theoretical framework that I used was a theory called flow theory by Csikszentmihalyi. Has anybody ever heard of Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi? Good. Okay. You can Google for him, and he's in Wikipedia, and so he posited forward. Some of his original work begins with the idea of pleasure and happiness, and from there he created what he calls flow theory, and that is the holistic positive sensation people feel when they act in total involvement or immersion. And I think most of us know exactly what that feeling is. It's when you're so focused you lose track of time, you lose track of where you are. It's not, we've all experienced it, I think, when we're surfing the web. I know many folks have experienced it while they've been in world. It can actually happen. It is a great feeling, you're absolutely right. It is. It can actually happen when you're reading a book. It's been known to happen in athletic situations too. So professionals and other athletes have been known to move into a state of flow, like while out on the football field. It can happen while you're busy crocheting or knitting or sewing. So it's not specific to just technology, but it was an angle at looking at learning that was very, very intriguing to me. So you're right, flow equals optimal performance. You're exactly right. And so another reason which drew me to Csikszentmihalyi's theory for flow was that he had actually dissected or sort of broken down his definition of flow into 9 very, very specific measurable objectives or dimensions. And I found that very clean and neat. And so the 9 of them are listed right there below. Clear goals, feedback, challenge, skill, concentration, loss of place, loss of time, actually a temporary loss of self, and a feeling, an autotelic feeling, which is most closely equated to sort of an intrinsic or an autonomous feeling. Do those 9 dimensions make sense to everybody? Does anybody want me to talk about any one of those more specifically? I tell you that the strongest, so I'll let you know what I found. Good. I'll let you know what I found, which was actually turned out to be very, very interesting. But of the 9 dimensions, the 2 that are in relationship most strongest to each other is the balance of challenge and skill. So if you look at the 3rd dimension, the idea that an individual has to have just enough challenge and just enough skill so that they don't, so that the environment does become very engaging. If they have too much challenge and not enough skill, as a lot of virtual world newbies may have, that they become anxious. And the opposite of that is true as well. So if you have too much skill and not enough challenge, you can become bored and apathetic. So that 3rd dimension is considered to be one of the strongest dimensions for flow, and it's a balance that's necessary between challenge and skill. As a matter of fact, some researchers will posit forward the idea that the challenge just has to slightly exceed skill, which is in fact what motivates you forward. So that's
Karen, there's a question about the the 9th one, autotelic. What is that?
So autotelic is, thank you, and Anders, thank you very much for just jumping in, because I am sort of peeking at chat, but I may in fact miss something. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. Autotelic is just it's most closely analogous to an intrinsic autonomous feeling, the feeling that you're in there for your own self, the feeling that you're empowered and you're on your own and you're there for your own reasons. You're not there for any other. You're not there for extrinsic reasons. Does that make sense? It's kind of a combination of intrinsic motivation as well as a feeling of an autonomous experience. So sort of self-motivation. You're absolutely right.
Okay. And would you tell
Go ahead.
So good.
Just that autotelic, it clearly is something that a person chooses to do. They're not necessarily, we've all done homework assignments or classroom assignments, assigned by the teacher, and so we would otherwise not want to be personally engaged in that activity. So along the lines of self-motivation, it is something that you intrinsically or personally desire to do.
Yeah, I think we're all in the flow here. Widget asked, are the physical markers of flow, blood pressure, pulse, endorphins, or something?
There are researchers who have actually taken biometrics and enhanced and further expanded upon Csikszentmihalyi's research on flow, but at this time, Csikszentmihalyi's work was very specifically to a user's response. So it actually was sort of, he's done research both on objective measures as well as subjective measures. So he has done research where he's actually had folks with beepers on, and at certain times during the day they've been asked to, based on when the beeper goes off, they've been asked to sort of evaluate their sense of feeling and what their activity was that they were doing. But for the most part, the 9 dimensions of flow end up being more of a subjective assessment for individuals. So at the end of the experience, or immediately right after the experience, or while in the experience, if an individual can pause and report back on their experiences across the 9 dimensions. So, but you're right, there is. Somebody just weighed in and said that there's other research that exists with regard to cardiovascular and other biometric measures. It sure does exist, but for the purposes of my research, it just focused on an individual's response. Any other questions? Okay. So then the third leg of my 3-legged stool was the learning activity. And this is an interesting thing. This was the actual activity that I chose to ask folks to embrace. I'll move to the next slide right here, and you can see that Bernie Dodge, back in 1995, and sort of constructed what he calls a Webquest. It was a web-based, inquiry-based, learner-centered, almost kind of like a scavenger hunt, in which a lesson plan or a learning activity could be created as long as those very 6 elements of the quest were included. So you may be asked, for example, this is going back to 1995 when he first laid this work out, you may be asked, for example, to learn about Pythagorean theorem. So you might have a tab on the website that introduces the background and the history behind the Pythagorean theorem. Then it goes forward and it tells you what your task is. And then it defines a process of how you're very specifically going to be asked to pursue learning about Pythagorean theorem. And this would be the teacher or the professors to define. Then you're given a list of resources on, and they're usually web links, on where to go. Your person can inquire and explore, sort of a little bit like a scavenger hunt, background information and details about Pythagorean theorem. And I'm just using Pythagorean theorem as an example. Then, of course, at the end of it, most pedagogically sound learning activities, there's an evaluation and then, of course, a conclusion. So using those 6 elements, what I did was I took that web quest and moved it into the virtual environment. So I created what I call the virtual world quest. And it also, too, was a self-directed, exploratory learning activity in which an individual could go in on their own. They received a HUD. The HUD had exactly 6 elements to it: introduction, task, process, resources, evaluation, and conclusion. And they were asked to explore the island that the Air Force had built. And the island is called Huffman Prairie Omega. And it is an environment that's rich in interactivity and space exploration, basic space exploration concepts. So it was important for me to not, try to assess quantum physics or anything else that was too terribly difficult. So the Huffman Prairie Omega build by the Air Force seemed to be a very desirable option for me. Individuals were asked to explore the island. They were asked to spend about 10 minutes, not 10 minutes, 1 hour, and Yes, I can send you a landmark. I'll put that in the chat line. Yes, it is open to the public. It is, in fact, yep. And I think you may even be able to just do a search for Huffman Prairie Omega, but I'll make sure that I put the SORL in the chat as well. Anyway, I had asked individuals to spend about an hour exploring, and I gave them a list. Part of their process was to look for very specific things, look for very specific readings, look for very specific landmarks within the island, and when they got there, they needed to read, they needed to touch, they needed to experience, ride, and also take pictures, take a snapshot as evidence that they had actually found or gotten to the thing that they were asked to find or get to or explore. So not unlike a scavenger hunt, if you will. The snapshots provided just a little bit of proof that the individuals were actually found what they said that they had found. So that was kind of an interesting angle, that a person couldn't profess to have found something or read about something or learned about something unless they had a snapshot to accompany it. They were asked to send me pictures, snapshots, email to a very specific email address, the snapshots that they had taken. And they were asked to find 10 different things. So I was expecting somewhere on the order of 10 different snapshots. So, any questions on defining the learning activity for now? Does that make sense? So here's what I did. Then what I did was I looked at their ability to perform from two different angles. Whoops. I looked at their ability to perform from two different angles. The first one was achievement, and I defined achievement to be how well they mastered content, and I used a knowledge-based check. So it was actually a multiple choice quiz. So at the end of their 1 hour exploration, I asked them to complete a multiple choice quiz in which they were queried or poked or pinged for how much they had actually learned. The second piece of their assessment was to, in fact, submit to this very special email address the snapshots that they had taken as evidence that they had actually found or done or experienced or read what I had asked them to, along with some content that explained the snapshot that they had actually sent to me. So does that make sense? They sort of put together a photo album, if you will. So there were two dimensions, two angles to my assessment. One of them was multiple choice, and the other one was to submit these snapshots along with content indicating that they had found the things that they were asked to find. Did self-directed learning? Yes, and actually what I did was I did my very best to sort of stratify my sample across levels of technology comfort, across gender, across age groups, and even best to sort of stratify my sample across a range of proficiencies and other demographic information. And yes, that's actually a very good question. One of my basic assumptions in order to participate in the research was that you had basic working knowledge of Second Life. And for obvious reasons. That was to make sure that the user wasn't inhibited in their ability to even be able to explore the island or find the information that they needed because they were having trouble navigating. So there was a requirement that individuals have a basic Second Life navigational skills down. I discovered that for the most part that was not an issue. Those folks who came forward and volunteered to be a part of the research did in fact have basic Second Life navigational skills. So the audience from which I inquired for participation was in fact Second Life forums and Second Life groups. I didn't go out to the web, and I didn't go to other sources. I started right in Second Life as my global population. Any questions? Did your subjects learn about themselves? In what way? As far as how well they were able to master the activity, or in what way? New insights. I think a lot of them, many of them professed, when I did, after I had done my data analysis, I did have some qualitative interview follow-up, and many of them did report that they had surprised themselves with their behavior. So yes, I would say that there really were some new insights about how they actually learned, what they found to be engaging, what they found not to be engaging, and what they would do again and differently. So, okay. So those are the two angles that I looked at for measuring how well they did. So the findings actually turned out to be very, very interesting. The first thing that I discovered was that there was no strong correlation between engagement and how well they achieved. Now remember, achievement was measured by the multiple choice quiz. And there were some reasons. I have some theories behind why that may be. One of them is that although learning isn't designated to a certain point in time, many users told me that while they were in the middle of a multiple choice quiz, if they didn't know the answer, they left the multiple choice quiz. It was a HUD, or they left the HUD on their screen, and they navigated out to go find the answer. Then they came back and then they reported correctly. So that in fact may have sort of skewed their answers, or at least skewed the relationship between how well they were engaged and how well they achieved. The performance, on the other hand, was much different. I found some very, very interesting findings with the relationship between how well they were engaged and how well they performed. Now remember, performance is measured by the photo packages, the photo album, if you will, that they were asked to put together. The first thing I found was there was a correlation. Those that were more engaged tended to perform better. Those that were less engaged tended to perform not as well. What was most interesting was that the accidental discovery that I had at this point. I mentioned earlier that I expected individuals to respond with approximately 10 snapshots that they would email to me, along with some content. And my performance rubric, very, very, I used external evaluators to help create and measure the snapshot photo packages, so I was not involved in the evaluation process at all. But as I expected most individuals to submit to me approximately 10 snapshots, what I ended up getting was a range from 4 to 74. So I actually had an individual who sent me only 4 snapshots. I had another individual who sent me as many as 74 snapshots, along with content. So it really took me back. It was way outside the range of what I expected to have to assess. And so my first thought was, okay, those folks that didn't adhere to the letter of the law was submit approximately 10 snapshots, I'm going to throw out their records. And I didn't for 2 reasons. And here's what I learned along the way. This is one of those unintended findings was, first of all, if I had thrown out everybody's record who didn't adhere to the letter of the law, I would have thrown out more than half of the records. So I had over 200 participants, my sample size, and I would have had to have thrown out more than 100 records. Number one, I didn't want to do that. And number 2, it became very, very clear to me that even though people weren't following the letter of the law, the spirit of the law had a story to tell. And so then I had to embark on figuring out how to measure these photo albums that were so incredibly diverse than what I thought that they would be. And what ended up happening was I ended up revising my rubric, which was the tool that I used and that was devised with external evaluators for measuring the photo albums. I ended up revising that 4 times before I was accurately able to assess the range of responses that I had gotten. I also found that there was a relationship in the demographics for individuals as well. The average age of my participant was, in fact, just like it is in Second Life, not the 20-year-old range, but the average age range of participants was about 35 to 45. I had a very serious, a more serious audience. So I had reason to believe that my data was valid. My data were valid. I did not have to. I was not inclined to believe that my data was terribly skewed by folks who were too casual in the effort. Many of them reported to be either educators or students who were very interested in the findings. So, age of oldest and youngest participants. Goodness gracious! Now you are. That's an excellent question. I think it was somewhere like between 19 and 62. But I confess that then I would have to actually go back to the data. But it was a wide range for sure, and it's been several years since I actually looked at the actual data. But yes, it does seem important. And like I mentioned before, I did my very best to stratify my sample size across age ranges, so I did not have a predominant number of just 50-year-olds or 20-year-olds. I tried to stratify it so that I had an even disbursement across the different age ranges. So that was a very interesting finding for me. So I think I just mentioned a lot of what I just said right here. So my first question was in fact answered. More engaged students actually did participate more. Maybe, yeah, thanks. They did in fact perform better. I also received the unexpected range of responses was that even though I had asked for 10, I received anywhere between 4 and 74. And another thing that was very interesting was that the individuals, many of the individuals didn't, in fact, I mentioned that they didn't adhere to the letter of the law. I had individuals find other individuals inside the learning activity and take pictures of them together. I had folks who were actually riding some of there's monorails and little sky lifts that are available on this build, and I had photos sent to me of individuals who didn't know each other before the activity, with photos of them sitting together on the activity. So folks had actually found and spent time together and networked and worked together on this. I had an incredibly high percentage of folks tell me that although they were asked to spend an hour on this activity, they spent many, many hours. I had several folks self-report quickly that they weren't getting real work done. I had many folks tell me that they ended up coming back the next day because the environment was so engaging that they just wanted to experience more. So as far as loss of time goes, that was one of my strongest dimensions that I found. It was very interesting. In any event, it became, I even had one individual, and this is speaking of creativity and innovation and this to try to grab and measure somehow. I even had one individual, instead of mailing me their snapshots to this email address they were asked to mail to, they downloaded their photos to their hard drive. They moved it into a movie file, created a video for me with audio overlay explaining the snapshots and the pictures, and created sort of like a video mosaic for me and uploaded it to YouTube. And what I received from them was nothing more than one link. So you can just imagine I was completely blown away when it came to how to assess the range between something like that and some of the other folks who in fact did turn in exactly what they were asked to. And one thing was clear to me though, almost everybody's experience went from being extrinsically motivated to being intrinsically motivated. That was a very, very common theme that folks have repeatedly reported. So, any questions about that? Most interesting and unexpected results, probably the strongest of the findings. Here's some of the responses that I received from individuals. You'll see that most of them are specific to the loss of time dimension. So folks reported spending hours instead of 1 hour. Many of them said they went back the next day. They spent more time than they realized that they were spending. So after I ended up revising the rubric 4 times and set the research back a few months, but that was absolutely a very, very, very important part of the study. It became very clear that open-ended and creative opportunities to perform in these environments can yield levels of creativity, engagement, and innovation within immersive platforms that are unexpected and far beyond that of traditional instructional settings. So it became clear to me that if you gave somebody an open-ended, autonomous opportunity to show their creativity, their innovation, and put together a portfolio, sort of an assessment, rather than a turnkey assessment that a multiple choice quiz is, folks will outperform above and beyond every time. And it makes perfect sense too. If you think about a multiple choice quiz, there was absolutely no way for a multiple choice quiz to adequately and accurately assess creativity and innovation. And that was perceived to be, that was hypothesized to be one of the strongest dimensions of a virtual environment for learning. So, this is another one of my favorite little slides too, because the technology was leveraged every step of the way. Out of everybody that I interfaced with, and I mentioned that I interfaced with over 200 participants, so between my participants and my external evaluators and even some of the folks on my committee that were helping me with the, work through the virtual environment details and the logistics and the research framework of this, there's only one individual I met face to face. Every other individual I interfaced with them, either chat, in-world audio, PayPal, Skype, email, online forums. Every individual was, if they participated in the activity and they completed all of the things they were asked to complete, they were given a stipend of $20 US. And so, as I mentioned before, originally they were extrinsically motivated to participate because they were getting some money to participate in this. But it became very clear to me that these folks went from being extrinsically motivated to intrinsically motivated because of the way they reported back to me. Having said that, though, they were offered their funding in either PayPal or Linden's. So technology was leveraged every single step of the way. And that's one of my funnest slides because I actually only interfaced with one individual, as I told you. So, bottom line is that virtual worlds are perceived to be, based on the research that I did, and of course there's limitations to the research I did. I looked at one specific, learning activity, one specific virtual world, one specific build, but for the scope of the research that I did, it became clear that engaged individuals can lead to increased performance in these environments, that self-directed and inquiry-based learning constructs are good instructional designs for these environments, that a balance between skill and challenge was necessary, and the opportunity to be creative, innovative, and flexible was a very important component in folks being able to, in my ability to see what the folks were capable of doing. Yes, so somebody asked me if every participant was already involved in Second Life. Yes, and no worries about that question. It's a great question. Everybody was asked to. I queried 4 participants only inside of Second Life. So I didn't use other virtual environments. I didn't use other learning groups. I didn't reach to anybody who might have to discover Second Life for the first time. I did require that all the individuals, all the participants have basic Second Life navigational skills mastered. And I think I included walking, teleporting, snapshots, communication, chat, and it seemed to be the case. There seemed to be no issues that were based on just technology troubles. Can you repeat what skills and learning objectives the participants were asked to pursue? So the learning objectives was a probe in the cognitive domain for information. It was not a fine motor, effort or anything, a physical motor coordination effort. It was a probe into the cognitive domain for mastery of information. And what they were asked to do was to use this virtual world quest, and it was a HUD that they received. They arrived on the island, they received the HUD. I actually have a video, but I don't have the video uploaded. But they were asked to arrive at the island, go over to a little kiosk, download the HUD, and the HUD was very, very self-explanatory, and it was designed very, very much like the Webquest, except it was moved into Second Life, so I called it a virtual world quest. And it gave a nice little introduction, then it gave a set of tasks that they were asked to do, it gave them a list of processes for how to do it, with very specific details of what was being asked of them. As far as resources go, there weren't links, but there were little teleport landmarks. So within the island, there were little mini teleport hubs to help them locate some of the things that might otherwise be more difficult for them to locate. So that was part of the resources. And then at the end, the assessment was, like I said, the two dimensions. One was the multiple choice quiz, and the other was the photo album, which was the collection of snapshots and content that they were asked to provide for them. So this slide's interesting because this is a piece of follow-on research that I'm still actively engaging in, and this is another build by. So immediately after that research was complete, the very next set of questions were asked, and a lot of good folks immediately, and I myself said, what would happen if we conducted that exact research using a different virtual world? What would happen if we created sort of a group setting instead of individual learning? Would the results different? Would they vary? What would happen if we compared a virtual environment with maybe a face-to-face classroom activity? And we did sort of a comparison across technology modalities, and it immediately probed our curiosity. And so one of the efforts that I'm embarking on right now is an effort that continues with the Air Force, and the Army's actually working in tandem with us as well. And we've taken another one of the Air Force's builds. We've sort of reverse engineered it, and we've got a web version of it, and we've got a text-based version of it. And we'll be sending participants through one of those three different modalities in a sort of a randomly sampled format. So if you were interested in participating, you wouldn't know until your assignment was actually given whether you were asked to take the learning activity in a text-based format, in a web-based format, or in the virtual world format. And we'll be looking at ability to achieve as well as levels of engagement. And yes, you know what, Bridget? We are in fact still we're very, very close to working through some of the details. But we are, in fact, if anybody's interested, please see me afterwards, and I will be happy to jot your name down and follow up with you for, or just type it in the chat log, and I will make sure that I save the chat log if you're interested in participating in the research. And it'll be interesting to find out what the findings are. Yep.
Yeah, this is so great. This is one of my pet peeves because, particularly in the corporate world, so much of research tend to be comparing something with nothing. You do a training program and you evaluate the results, and then you brag about how great your results were. But how would it be if we had rolled it out in a different modality? That's really what we're missing. We did it in a very small scale and not scientifically enough for our New York programs, and I'll be happy to share that with you, Karen, where we compared virtual worlds, classroom-based, a live exercise, and also a more traditional 2D flash-based course. And I'm wondering if you are considering broadening the modalities to do, for instance, more traditional e-learning and comparing that to virtual worlds, and perhaps also game-based learning.
You know, and those are all great ideas, and those are questions that poke at me because as an academic, as a researcher, my very specific area of research is not actually in the technology side of virtual worlds or importing or exporting or advancing the state of the technology, but it's actually in the human experience, and it's very specific to learning. So how well can individuals learn? So those questions that you just posed are very pertinent questions. We're moving forward with this one next research question that actually does a very, it's a threefold modality comparison, but there's opportunity for future research for sure. And I think that the sky's the limit as far as determining what might be compared next. I do know that it was very, very important for us to make sure that we compared apples to apples. So we took the virtual world learning environment, we reverse engineered it to a web-based environment, and then reverse engineered that to a text-based environment. So the text version is a sequential, top-down, text-based version of the learning activity with photos, static still photos embedded in it. The web version is in fact the exact same learning activity, but it has hierarchical branching the way a web does. It has photos and it has videos. So it moves to a more interactive platform. And then of course the virtual environment is a full experiential learning activity. So in order to be able to move that into a game-based format, it would be a very interesting effort, and it would be very important to make sure that we actually don't lose the essence of the learning activity along the way. But yes, that's actually a great idea. So that was our next set of questions, and that's where we're continuing with the research.
Sorry, I think I missed the group. So what was group learning?
Those were just some of the questions that were posed to us. And we're not pursuing that question specifically in our next set of research, but it was one of the questions that came out at us immediately was, would these individuals perform differently? Would there be different results with regard to engagement and performance if individuals were actually team learning or group learning in a group setting? So it was just one of the questions that begged me as the next set of inquiry, as the next place for inquiry.
So you're going to do that in the virtual group learning in virtual world or in classroom or both?
We haven't gotten that far to actually flesh out the design of that, but it would definitely be, in order to probably make sure that we were comparing apples to apples, we would probably stay within the virtual, the same platform, so that we would just be comparing individual versus group, and we wouldn't be adding modalities into the equation for change as well. But that's
fascinating. We have just anecdotal feedback, but this New York simulation, we've had people do individually and in group, and we're just finding anecdotally that groups doing it in group is just so much more powerful than doing it in individually.
Yes, there's a lot of indicators that suggest that as well. There's one question that I did want to make sure I answered. I did see somebody say to me, how did you measure flow? And I wanted to make sure I spoke to that, because I spoke to how I measured achievement, which was the multiple choice quiz, and I spoke to how I measured performance, and those are my operational definitions. So I measure performance by the photo packages, the photo albums, if you will. The flow was measured using an instrument that was designed by Dr. Susan Jackson from Australia over a decade ago. She worked very, very closely with Csikszentmihalyi, and she had tested her instrument and done an awful lot of research and had tested her instrument across over 24 different settings and places and environments. And her instrument has been proven to be both reliable and valid across a range of settings and formats. So her very specific instrument that she developed is called the flow state scales. I can type that in, the flow state scales. If you Google for that, you'll find some information. I use very specifically of her scales. I use the FSS2 instrument. She's got several flavors to them, and I use the FSS2 instrument. And then also too, before I forget, this is the name of the. I want to make sure I don't have that typo in there. That's the island that I use, and the island's still very much there. And I believe the kiosk for the Webquest, for the Virtual World Quest, may in fact still be there. If you arrive on the island and you go down the ramp just a little bit and look to your left, you will in fact see a kiosk that will welcome you and ask if you want to take part in the Virtual World Quest, and you can mount the HUD and experience what some of the folks did. I think the latest version is still out there, but it's been a while, I confess, so I'm not sure if it is. Any questions about that? The flow state scales are a very interesting. It's a very interesting instrument for the academics in the audience because it was a set of 36 questions with each of the 9 dimensions being probed at 4 different times in 4 different ways. So if you think about that, that makes a collection of 36 different questions, and I used that as the most objective angle I could get at for actually measuring flow. So how many subjects did you have for this study? 200. I targeted 200. So what was the breakdown of accepting USDs or Lindens? Oh, did you find, oh, you know what? I actually, Andy, that's a great question. Did you pay either PayPal or in Lindens? I had more than 50% of the folks requesting PayPal. I guess because it equated to cash and it was more versatile at the end of the day. This next study, the one that compares the 3 different modalities and the Air Force's other learning activity, I will be offering just Lindens, because just for simplicity's sake, because the PayPal did get very, very complicated, and individuals were sending me wrong email addresses, and it was difficult. Lindens are clean, and I have an avatar name to begin with, and so individuals will be paid this time with Lindens, and they'll be offered it only in Lindens. Yeah, and the size and the scope of this follow-on research is not going to be as extensive as the first one was. The first one, as I indicated before, was dissertation work, and so it was, by design to be a more robust study. This next one is probably going to have, we're targeting a sample size of maybe about 75 individuals, 25 that will be assigned randomly to the text-based version, 25 that will be assigned to the web version, and 25 that will be assigned to the virtual world environment. And that's not actually to say that the virtual build is going to yield that well. It may be perceived to be too complicated for the learning activity that was targeted, but that's all part of our good findings we're hoping to understand.
Now, you connected to what else the Navy is doing in virtual worlds. I know the Naval Warfare Center at least used to have a pretty big presence in Second Life. I haven't followed that lately. Would you be able to address what they're doing, what you guys are doing in virtual worlds training?
Yeah, we sure are. And like I said, one of the I call them my people. So across DoD, there's a small group of us that we found each other, almost sort of in a grassroots evolutionary kind of a fashion. We found each other who are involved in virtual worlds. And the really nicest part about it is that we've all got very specific angles or focuses of interest. And some of the good folks are interested in pursuing the technology advance, so the pursuance of OpenSIM and how to affect policy in the Navy, and advance the state of importing and exporting and hypergrid capabilities. A lot of good folks who are working at, I believe, Anders, you're referring to the Naval Undersea Warfare Center in Newport, Rhode Island. I work very closely with those good folks. And I'm from actually the Naval Air Warfare Center. So I'm from a warfare center as well, but my command specializes in aircraft. So
what I was referring to, I was Doug Maxwell stuff with the submarine things.
Yes, and Steve Aguiar's work as well. So the really nicest part about yes, Moses, exactly, Graham. You're exactly right. So the very nice symbiotic part about us working together is that we all have different areas of focus and different interest areas. I think I tend to probably be the most strictest academic in my area of interest is empirical research and how it relates to what in fact has been built. Because one of the things that frustrates me the most, and this is just, philosophically, I study the environment. It appears to me, and please chat in and let me know whether you've found similar findings, is that an awful lot of folks will run to the bling, because there's a lot of bling and a lot of allure in virtual worlds, and they may even, in fact, design a very beautiful build, but the thing that they were targeting learning isn't something that might be most suited for a virtual environment. So depending upon what your learning objectives are, that in fact is what really dictates your technology-enabled platform that you select. And there's a lot of times when a text-based file is really the right way to learn something, and a virtual environment is not necessary. I spend a lot of time looking at learning constructs and determining how well suited they are for virtual environments, and helping to sort of educate that forward so that we don't continue to just innocently but ignorantly run to the bling because we can, and then design something that may be very sophisticated, but still the learner at the end of the day may say, well, this is really stupid, because we didn't assess the goals of the instruction and the needs assessment well enough.
So I'm jumping here. There were a couple of questions that people are reminding me I forgot to ask. Could you give examples of the types of multiple choice questions you were using?
So one of them was at one of the locations in the learning activity, they were asked to read a poster, and the poster explained who the author of a piece of Air Force work was and what that person was famous for. So one of the multiple choice questions were who in fact was the author of this piece of work. So it was a matter of actually having found the poster, reading the poster, and learning about it. Another example was they were asked to find a telescope, and inside the telescope, if you clicked on the telescope and experienced it properly, it pulled up a little constellations and planets and comets, etc. And so one of the questions targeted what you were able to see, and there's no way you would have known what the telescope was able to provide for you in the menu format unless you had actually gone to the telescope and experienced it. So some of it was kind of simple, some of it was technical, but that's the range of questions that were typically asked.
Okay. And people are asking if your research is published and where.
It is. I think if you search for "Go with the Flow," which was the name of it, I know that one of my papers is on the ITSIC website, which is as a previous paper submission. "Go with the Flow" was the preceding part of the dissertation that I think it's out there in public domain. And then of course you can search for my name with "Go with the Flow," and I suspect you'll get a hit. If anybody would like either the larger dissertation work or the smaller papers that were extracted from it, I'd be happy to send them to you. Typically what I do is I'll send either the abstract or the chapter 1 and most folks find that to be sufficient for
Susan,
very dry
Susan already
academic
found
reading.
it. Thank you,
Somebody
Susan.
already-
Susan already
Thank
found
you.
it. She posted the link.
Yes, and,
All right.
and DTIC was another one of the locations another one of the conferences that I presented at. So yes, there's a couple of them out there, I think. As well as I think if you're affiliated with the university and you have access to the dissertation database, I know that it was submitted as a public submission. So, are there any other questions? Hopefully this time together has been helpful in oh, thank you. There's evidence and there's testimony that the time that we're all spent in here trying to understand these environments, both for building and for learning, that there's evidence that these platforms are very promising for an individual's ability to be able to be engaged and learn, right?
Yeah. Yeah, this is great. It gives hard evidence to what we all like to think that we know, but we always are hard pressed for actually providing hard evidence when people ask about the effectiveness.
Yep, absolutely. And if anybody's, the last thing I'll end with is if anybody wants to either IM me or just let me know in the chat line if you're interested in being amongst the participants in the next research study, I would be happy to include you. Again, like I said, these findings were very unexpected, which is the really cool part about virtual worlds, right? And because I like to call it a pioneering technology, so we never know what we're going to actually find. So it'll be real interesting to see what we find in the next research endeavor. I'm not necessarily going to even posit that what's been designed in the virtual environment is the best way to deliver that sort of learning activity. We'll find out, right?
Yeah. So, Leslie, what kind of impact does this have in the Navy and Department of Defense in general? Do you get to go around a lot and present these findings?
Oh,
and what kind of feedback are you getting?
This work was actually conducted a couple of years ago, like I said, in the 08 timeframe and published in 09. One of the things that I've discovered, and I'm sure many of you could probably tell me more stories than I could share, is that work or advances made in virtual worlds, because they are in fact pioneering technologies, can tend to very nicely and easily take on a life of its own. I've actually not had to solicit or peddle for any of my presentation time, my opportunities or abilities to share the research and my findings, and it just excites me so, because I'm just really passionate about this, and not for the presentation aspect of it, but for the educational aspect of it. I think it's real important for educators to know the best way to design in these environments so that the greatest amount of learning can occur. And I'm also very, very passionate about making sure other folks, the individuals out there don't just run to the blame. That there's a lot of learning activities. There may be a learning activity out there in which just, a rubber snake is the right tool to use and nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
It all depends upon what your goal is, what your instructional goal is. So I'm very passionate about that, and one of the things I've discovered is that I've not had to peddle or solicit for any of this. The phone just sort of tends to ring, much like how our paths crossed again, Anders.
Yeah, great. And thank you, Susan and others, for continuing to post links there in chat. So when someone asks about the YouTube video, and yes, indeed, we are video recording this, so it will be up thanks to Stelianos. So it'll be on his blog and on our Facebook site. Excellent. Well, we're hitting the end of our hour here. I want to thank you so much, Karen. This has been really inspiring. Great work, and I will be sure to look at some of those links too, and using them in my arsenal when people ask about hard evidence of the effectiveness of immersive and engaging
Great
learning.
opportunity.
So
it was actually it was a privilege to serve, and it's been a delight to spend the hour with you all. So thank you again for this opportunity. It's been my privilege.
Oh, thanks. And Light just posted the link to our Facebook page, and I hope to see you all back next week. We're going to have John Brouchard here to show some of the latest work that he's been doing in bringing Second Life to the web through Unity. Really cool stuff. So be sure to see us back here in Second Life for our meeting next week. So that's Chris Collins and John Brouchard who are going to present next week. And the week after that, you probably know him, Karen. Daniel Laughlin from NASA will talk about the massively multiplayer game that he's developing. So got a great lineup. We've got IBM. They're going to talk about diversity training, and others. So got a good lineup for you. So hope to see you all back next week. And as always, feel free to contact myself or Light or Peter Guastella here with ideas for future topics. And if we can help you at the Groundstart Group with any of your learning needs, feel free to contact myself directly. Thank you.